We are tracking the NFL draft here at the Voice of College Football. Good evening to everyone and welcome in. And of course, this is one of my favorite events of the entire sports calendar that's not actually participated on a field. So, yes, the NFL draft has been rather eventful with not a galore of trades, at least tonight, but a number of trades leading into the draft. And of course, the big one that set up the number one overall selection, Bryce Young, Alabama quarterback to Carolina. We will discuss the NFL draft with all of you. And of course, you should know this if you watch the show on a regular basis. We discuss anything related to college football. So, this is an NFL draft post-game show of sorts. However, we open up the field to talk anything related to college football. And really, being a college football guy, what I've been keeping track of and just tweeted out a few minutes ago was the leaderboard for conferences. And with back-to-back Georgia players being selected in the last two selections, the SEC has once again taken the lead over the Big Ten, but it's a struggle for the SEC as opposed to most of the last 17 years in which the SEC has had the most first-round selections in the NFL draft for 17 consecutive years. And it appears as though they will once again, unless the Kansas City Chiefs select a Big Ten player, but it's 9-8 right now with the SEC leading over the Big take our first call of the night. We have left the link in the chat. So please join us talking college football, talking NFL draft here at the Voice of College Football. Mr. David Greenshield joining us.
Yes, quite an eventful first round, an interesting one. I'm taking a look at it. I thought that I guess we still got one more pick with Kansas City, right, Mark?
Yes.
By the way, I love the attire. The jacket looks great.
Well,
just want to say
thank you.
that. Looking good. Looking forward to eventually getting some of that Mark Rogers gear. I will say this. I thought that Stroud to 2. What did you think about Stroud to 2 to the Texans?
I'm gonna ping it back to you, David, before I make that evaluation.
Yeah.
Because you have followed the draft process leading up to tonight much more than I have. I've not followed it at all.
Well, not as much as I have in years past. I will say
you
that.
did make that comment the other night. The comparison between C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young. Now, Bryce Young is an accurate passer. There's no question about that. I would, having watched both of them play extensively, consider C.J. Stroud to be a better thrower of the football and more accurate than Bryce Young, not by leaps and bounds, but more accurate than Bryce Young. So Bryce Young, again, not having ideal height, not having ideal size, and CJ Stroud's a bit lean himself, but he certainly has a bigger build to fill out.
Right.
I got to think that the athleticism is weighing in on Bryce Young's side. Is that the reason why he has been selected first?
I think that's part of it. I don't know if some of this testing, which I think is bogus, that came out about CJ Stroud late in the process here. I'm not buying into that. As I said about CJ the other night, my only issues with him from time to time is I do think there was a time where I think he would force a pass or two here and there. Not too many times, but for the most part, I think he was, usually a good decision maker. Obviously, I mean, the accuracy to me and ball placement just always impressed me. Now, I will say, like most Ohio State fans, I wished he would have used his legs more. We didn't see that until Georgia. He didn't have to for the most part. Ohio State was really good in pass pro. So, but that doesn't mean that they couldn't design more rollouts and bootlegs and utilize his legs a little bit more, which I think they should have done, some of which they did do against Georgia with a month off to prepare. But yeah, I mean, I think that Houston could be an interesting situation for him. I heard a commentator make a great point. They're going to need to get him some skill down there, get him some weapons. Obviously, we know he had that at Ohio State. Um, it's going to be interesting to see, how much they build around him because I mean that's the rationale in the NFL. You get the quarterback and then you build, and that's what they're going to have to do. I will say this about Bryce Young, though. I mean, I like Bryce Young. I thought he impressed me a little bit more. Did he impress you a little bit more this year than he did in 2021?
No, I'm not going to say that he did. I really can't think of what when I think of his national championship game appearance, his SEC championship game from the year before against
Yeah.
Georgia,
Yep.
and also not having an exceptional game 2 years ago against Auburn, but leading them down the field. It was like a 90-some yard drive. They were backed up in their own end zone. It was like a 97-yard drive at the end of that game, and he threw some really fine balls. One that they actually used to highlight was the game-tying touchdown pass in the Auburn game. So, to his credit, I don't think there was a great distinction between the 2 years, but I do think that he was obviously he was the Heisman Trophy winner, but I'm not resting on that. That I did think that he had a slightly better season the year before.
Well, here was the thing. I mean, actually, he's impressed me the last couple years. The one thing that I will say is, Bryce Young did not have the same benefit that Mac Jones and Tua had before him as far as level of talent around him, at Alabama. I mean, I think that Tua and Mac Jones were on the most loaded offensive rosters that probably Saban's ever had. That, I guess it's 3-year period there, 18, 19, and 20. When you look at receivers, you look at offensive line in particular. That was the thing that really impressed me, with their 2020 team is I thought they had easily the best offensive line in the country that year. I don't think Bryce Young had that same level of offensive line play his 2 years at Alabama. The other thing that he didn't have this year that he had in 2021 is obviously the receivers. Jamison Williams and Mechie in 21. The Alabama receiver situation was not great last year.
No.
I mean, you watched Alabama play, and I really think it was two players that carried that offense the entire year. I think it was Bryce Young and Jahmyr Gibbs just carried that Alabama team for large portions of last season.
Very true. Very true. And that's a great point, and it's accurate. On the flip side, I would say that Alabama's running game, because of Gibbs, was much better this past season
Yeah,
to take some pressure off of him. The year before, that Alabama team, for them to come within minutes of a national championship, they had the worst rushing season of an Alabama team under Nick Saban by far. They had like anemic efforts against Auburn, LSU, talking about 30 and 40 yards rushing in those games. So he really had to shoulder the load, and he had Gibbs this past season. But yeah, from a wide receiver standpoint, they were seriously lackluster. And maybe they win a national championship the year before, as is much talked about with Jamison Williams, had he stayed in the lineup. Because if you watch the last drive or two of that game against Georgia, he got seriously let down by his wide receivers at the conclusion of the Georgia championship game.
That's what I said to you after the Ohio State loss to Georgia. I said, did an injury to a wide receiver in both games help Georgia win a national championship in back-to-back years?
Absolutely, it did.
I mean, the Georgia fans told me I couldn't complain about injuries after the game because they had injuries. But, certain players are more replaceable than other players. To be fair, they are. I mean, Marvin, there's only one best wide receiver in the country, and I still believe Marvin Harrison was the best wide receiver in the country. I think Jalen Hyatt stole that Biletnikoff from him last year. I'm not going to go there, but ask Georgia who was tougher to cover, Hyatt or Marvin Harrison, and it wasn't even close. Who had a bigger game against Georgia between the two?
Well, no, that was not close.
I will say, I mentioned Gibbs. He's the one guy in this draft that I really, really liked. I actually, who I'm high on in this draft, by the way, I think it'd be impact guys, as far as two impact players. are the two running backs, the top two running backs.
Well, Bijan Robinson, he is certainly built to be the next large traffic, heavy workload guy in the NFL. He's just a monster physically. And I think built for that kind of endurance and that kind of pounding, like something close to what Derrick Henry has to endure.
Yeah, I wish Ohio State would have never have lost him in recruiting, and they had him too. And that was a last second flip to Texas. Regular coup for Tom Herman, who got him in recruiting, by the way.
Yeah, and from a
yeah.
NFL standpoint, certainly that worked out for Bijan Robinson because he's doing just fine as it turned out. But if he wanted to win in college, obviously he did not make the right selection.
Yeah. I mean, obviously though he put up real good numbers though, Texas, and was
Sure.
obviously,
And he
but
played behind pretty bad offensive lines.
yeah, it wasn't like upper tier offensive lines there at Texas. Gibbs, though, I tell you what, though, every game I watched Alabama, the 3 or 4 times seeing him play, he always seemed to make a big play happen. Arkansas, early in the year against Texas. I know there's another game, Tennessee, later in the year. And he can catch the ball out of the backfield. I think you comped him to Alvin Kamara, if I'm not mistaken, right, Mark?
Yeah,
That was your
I did.
comp?
I did. I'm not a big comp guy, but I did throw that one out there. Yeah. Because he's a really good pass receiver out of the backfield.
Yeah.
And he's thick and just has a slight look of a Eric Dickerson. He runs pretty upright.
I don't know if I'm willing to go there, Mark.
Okay.
You're getting into rarefied air now, Mark. You're getting into rarefied air.
Yes, understand the comps, not necessarily the same. The look, the appearance of.
Okay.
Yes.
I had heard one earlier that I kind of like too. I heard Jamal Charles earlier.
Okay.
I don't know about that. I think he's a little bit taller, I think, than Jamal Charles.
Yeah. That's the first thing that came to mind for me too. Yeah. Jamal Charles was a pretty short guy.
Yeah, that's true. By the way, no Will Levis going. What did you think of that, by the way?
Well,
all the Will Levis. Where's all this Will Levis love? Where's the real MVP? I want to get him to chime in. His buddy didn't go in the top.
Yes, we would love to hear from the real MVP.
Yeah.
Let's ask all of ourselves this question: if we just watched Will Levis in college and didn't listen to or watch any mock drafts or listen to any analysis about Will Levis, and then we were sitting here at the conclusion of the first round of the NFL draft, would any of us be surprised or be asking about Will Levis?
Listen, I never got the Will Levis hype to begin with. I mean, the guy threw 20-some touchdown passes at Kentucky, and I'm supposed to think he's a franchise NFL quarterback now? I'm sorry. And I know everybody's going to go, well, the competition he played against, and everybody's going to talk about, the measurables and the fact that maybe he wasn't surrounded with a boatload of NFL talent.
Bad offensive line.
Yeah, but the mark of a great quarterback, and this is why I think that some teams want to draft, used to say that they liked small school quarterbacks, was because they were able to be productive without being surrounded with a boatload of NFL talent. Now, you could also argue that. Go ahead.
I would love to go through first-round NFL draft selections at quarterback and compare them statistically to their college careers and see which guys elevated. The first guy that comes to mind is somebody that we talked about the other night. Mm-hmm. Josh Allen did not have good numbers in college.
No, he didn't.
They were Will Levis's numbers were better than Josh Allen's.
True.
Off the top of my head.
And Will Levis had to play against much better competition than Josh Allen did. So, yeah.
But to your point, 90-some% of the time, great NFL quarterbacks dominated in college.
Right. Well, I mean, usually but like I'm saying, though, I was going with like a small school guy. Like if you took a quarterback out of the MAC or you took a quarterback, a non-Power 5 or smaller divisions, usually I want that quarterback to have been dominant in college too. I want to see some numbers, some productivity as well.
How are you relating that to Will Levis?
Well, I'm not relating it. I'm just saying that I understand when people. I'm just making a general statement on when teams draft small school quarterbacks. My feeling is that if you're going to draft a small school quarterback, that make sure it's a productive one. I guess I was going because you opened up the Josh Allen thing. That's where I was going with that. That's why I had my doubts about Josh Allen because he didn't put up dominant numbers at a small school
I
coming
can't
out.
think of too many small school quarterbacks who are starting right now in the NFL.
We had a run there for a while, like in the early 2000s. When you saw like a Roethlisberger or a Flacco or something like that.
Sure.
The last one, well, I guess
Carson Wentz.
Josh Allen was a small school quarterback. Yeah, Carson Wentz was a small school quarterback, although maybe we shouldn't be talking about Carson Wentz right now.
Yeah. we shouldn't be from a
Yeah.
production standpoint, but as I go through the league, I'm just thinking I'm running into all big school quarterbacks.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Maybe that trend is now over of everybody's looking well because quarterbacks are more translatable from some of these programs too.
I also think that some of these smaller schools became more sophisticated with their offenses and passing games out of necessity first.
Yeah, maybe with their offensive concepts and schemes.
Yeah, that's where I'm going with that.
Okay.
Well, we do have the real MVP chiming in here. Do you guys want to have a conversation?
Sure, I would love to hear DeReal's opinion about Will Levis.
Welcome into the show, to Real MVP.
Hello, Mark. Hello, David. Sorry I took a while. When
No,
your
that's
team
okay.
is the last one to pick, you've got to wait a while. It's the downside to winning the Super Bowl.
Go Chiefs.
Exactly.
There you go.
But, oh my gosh, Will Levis. Levis. Once he fell from 4, I thought it would be a while. I thought the Tampa Bay Buccaneers might get a quarterback. I thought the Rams might have traded in. It was, this happens. This sometimes just happens. It isn't one player for whatever reason falls. But does this mean his career's over? No. Does this mean he isn't a first round talent? No. Sometimes it's just not the right situation for teams and they pass up on a guy. And that's okay.
Hey, DeReal, can I ask you a couple questions about him?
Yeah.
Number one, do you see him as a legitimate starter in the NFL, or do you think in the next 5 years he's basically a clipboard quarterback, i.e. a backup?
I think he'll be an average quarterback.
Okay.
Like, if you want a comp, I'll give him Derek Carr.
You're going to go who?
Derek Carr.
Wow.
Go
ahead.
Yeah, he'll never do anything to win you a Super Bowl or anything like that, but he'll sneak into the playoffs a few years. He can carry a team and have moments of greatness. But outside of that, he'll need a lot of help around him, I think, to succeed.
Yeah, I wonder if actually setting the bar at Derek Carr is a little bit too high is where I was going to go with that. I mean, I was going to ask you, do you think the reason he was going as high as maybe as people thought he was is I don't think this is a super, super strong quarterback draft. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Outside of Stroud and Bryce Young, there's not anybody that I can see as definitely a first-round quarterback. And Anthony Richardson.
Yeah.
My gosh, I'm sorry, but the Indianapolis Colts, the sign and take Anthony Richardson fourth, was, in my opinion, the worst decision in this draft class.
Wow.
Rolling the dice.
Yeah. It's not just that they're rolling the dice. What evidence do they have that he's good?
Oh, there's evidence of it.
He's just a freak.
There's a lot of evidence, but there's a lot. It's not consistent enough. Oh, you throw his best tape out there, he's a Pro Bowl quarterback.
Oh, yeah. Mac Jones was a Pro Bowl quarterback. Tyler Huntley was a Pro Bowl quarterback.
Yeah, I think he had the good game against Utah. He started 13 games in college. I thought I saw a stat that Clad had this is a couple of years ago, Mark, that quarterbacks that usually have had success in the NFL at least have a couple of years under their belt as starters. I know that everybody's going to give me some exceptions, but I've always felt that that's a good thing, that you've got at least a couple years as a starter. I always
Well,
thought
we
that's
talked about
helpful.
you and I talked about that the other night,
Yeah.
and I went way back to Akili Smith, but also, who else is coming up to mind is Mitch Trubisky. Only had one starting
Mm-hmm.
season
Right.
in college football, and yeah, somebody in the chat bring up successful NFL quarterbacks who only started 1 year in college.
Who was that quarterback? I think he was from North Carolina. He started 13 games as well.
Daniel Jones.
Mitch Trubisky. I just mentioned him.
Oh,
Oh no, Jones was out of what, Duke,
Duke.
right? Yeah, Duke. Okay, my bad.
I thought North
Yeah.
Carolina had one recently. It started 13 games. But I just there's not any
Sam Howell, but he played 4 years.
anyway. He's a freak athlete, but outside of that, I mean, with next year's quarterback class, for me, I think if you're a Colts fan, you're devastated. He's going to start. All the Colts do is run the ball. They're going to pack in the box. He's going to get absolutely, in my opinion, he's going to get absolutely destroyed because teams are going to figure out he's not really an accurate passer.
This is so we got two quarterbacks served up here in response to my question. And again, chat, my question is, name a starting quarterback, a successful NFL quarterback who started just 1 year in college. No, Rowan, Phillip Rivers played a ton of football at NC State. Tim, Mark Sanchez was a successful quarterback in the NFL. His defense was successful. He taking him to two AFC championship games. I don't consider Mark Sanchez to be successful.
Tearing up Ohio State and Penn State that year, I think, got Mark Sanchez drafted that high, by the way. He had two good games, and one of them was against Ohio State that year, and the other was Penn State in the Rose Bowl. I remember that. I think even Pete Carroll said at the time he was surprised that Sanchez left early.
Absolutely. He should have stuck around.
Come back. Maybe our USC people will chime in on that one. Yeah. I thought Richardson, I had no idea he was ever going to come out and be in this draft. I thought that, he would just go back to college and try and get developed a little bit more. Because, obviously, and I love it. Some of the announcers are saying he's got accuracy issues. Do you think that could be a problem if you want to be a starting quarterback in the NFL? I've heard that's important.
I think so. And one of the people I've been watching the ESPN. One of the people said, well, the reason Will Levis hasn't been taken compared to the other three, he mentioned something about mechanics or consistency issues. I'm thinking Anthony Richardson was taken, for goodness sakes. Will Levis has much better consistent, or at least similar consistency to Anthony Richardson. Like, Anthony Richardson is a guy where any play you don't know if he can throw a touchdown or an interception. I mean,
the chat's coming up with one player. So the Rod Farva said Cam Newton. Cam Newton for me, I will consider him, even though he had a rocky career and up and down and really was pretty marginal for most of it. Still successful quarterback. He won an MVP, went to a Super Bowl. Right. He was a starting quarterback for quite some time. So that's how that emphasizes the point.
By the way,
one guy.
By the way, Mark also carried a roster that wasn't loaded with NFL talent. Go back and look at 2010 Auburn. Not a boatload of NFL talent surrounded Cam Newton on that roster.
Yeah, single-handedly, I would say, carried them to beat Alabama, that Iron Bowl as well.
Yeah.
One of the most impressive comebacks in the modern era, in my opinion.
Well, they won like 4 close games that year. I mean, they barely beat Clemson earlier in the year. They had to kick the field goal on the last play to beat Oregon for the national championship. And I think LSU was a close game, too. Wasn't that a touchdown game, Mark?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was a close game. But,
Mark,
I'm racking my brain for quarterbacks who only played 1 year in college.
Mark, I saw one of your tweets. It said at the 24th pick.
All right. I was hoping. Yes, the SEC.
We tied. I think we tied at 9 apiece.
No, the SEC had 10.
Who was the 10th guy?
There were back-to-back Georgia players selected, correct?
No,
Yes.
no. I don't think anybody. I don't think there was a Georgia guy that went before Nolan Smith.
Okay.
Yeah, I
I'm
didn't
gonna
think
I'm
so
gonna
either.
count this again.
Okay.
But just so everyone knows what we're talking about, for 17 consecutive years, 06 through 22, the SEC had the most first round draft selections in the NFL draft, and the Big Ten was challenging that tonight. And at one point, I tweeted out that it was 8-8 after 24 picks. So you guys continue, and I'll count this up.
I thought DeJuan Jones, being an Ohio State fan, might have had a shot to make it to the Bengals at the end of the first round. They need offensive tackle help. Could have been a good pick there.
Yeah, but David, if you're a Cincinnati fan, you should know by now that they don't care about the offensive line. They've had that issue for a decade.
Well, to be fair to Real, they did go out in free agency and make some moves and invest in it towards the end of the year. I'm not a Bengals fan, by the way. I'm a Browns fan.
Well, they got Orlando
unfortunately.
Brown. They took one of the Super Bowl champions away from the Chiefs.
Yeah.
So that was beautiful. Did you see the awesome trophy presentation Kansas City did? They announced they have arrived, and I was hoping they would put a fourth stand up and put future Super Bowl reserved for here.
Okay.
And then announce the pick by saying the future Super Bowl champion is.
I figured you'd get a kick out of that.
Oh, I would. Hey, David, I really think Chiefs are going 20-0 next year. I just don't see any team being competitive.
Are you channeling your inner Nick Wright there, Darrell? I mean, I think he made that prediction. I don't know if you follow him on Fox Sports. Big Chiefs fan. I think he picked them to go undefeated a couple of years ago. By the way, that didn't work out.
Yeah, I know, but listen. Chiefs have got more experience. They've got more continuity among their core guys. I think this year will be the. I mean, look at the teams they've got to face: the Bengals, the Bills. I mean, what have these teams done recently? Not a whole lot of anything. The NFC is completely weak. I mean, what's their best quarterback? Dak Prescott?
Well, it's the NFL. The AFC is a landmine. I mean, now that Rodgers has come over from the NFC, if you rank the 10 best quarterbacks in the NFL, what are 9 of them in the AFC right now?
Yeah, it might be all 10.
It might be all 10. Yeah, if we rank the 10 best quarterbacks in the NFL, they might be all in the AFC right now.
Yeah,
I mean, it depends on where you rank Hurts.
Yeah, Hurts is the only one that can really. And Dak Prescott may be sneak in at 10, but may not. But I mean, Aaron Rodgers, he's a cool name and stuff, but he didn't perform well last year.
Yeah, he's inheriting a good roster, though, a really good roster. I mean, I was wondering what the Jets were going to do with that pick. By the way, I will say this, as from an Ohio State perspective, if I can chime in, I have my doubts about Jackson Smith and Jigba. Although, Seattle might not be a destination. I know a lot of Ohio State people were saying, like last year, that he could be the best of their group of receivers. I don't know if he has that Wilson and Olave type impact his first season, Mark. Just want to throw that out there.
Well, that's a high bar to achieve.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Olave didn't necessarily, or Wilson didn't necessarily go to, quarterback strong teams with the Jets and.
Oh, not at all. They were a revolving door. Zach Wilson obviously got benched, and they went to the unknown guy. I'm trying to think of his name. Nobody ever heard of the guy that they quarterbacked and did much better than Zach Wilson. They were kind of embarrassed by their draft selections there because they're pulling out a free agent who played better than Zach Wilson. But anyway, for sure. Yeah, neither one had strong quarterback play.
I see it in your bottom third that you have the Big Ten first and then the SEC second. I feel like if you're being objective, the tiebreaker should be which pick was overall higher. So I feel like the SEC should get the tiebreaker.
But if you rank by points, the SEC also had the last selection. And if you go by alphabetical order, the Big Ten would come first. Or if you're hosting the show and own the channel, then
Okay, those are all valid and fair points, Mark.
Yes.
But hey, the streak does continue for the SEC having the most or tied with the most. We just have to add that.
But you're going to have to make that disclaimer has to be included now, or tied with the most, because they did not have the most this year.
Right, but it's still It wasn't like they were beaten.
No.
So
Tied for the most.
exactly.
But that's a nice achievement for the Big Ten for people that keep track of that kind of stuff.
Who's the biggest impact player in this draft? Do you think, Darrell? Who's the rookie that you think has the biggest impact?
Ooh, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. Because what do you define that for me? Are you talking about which one will have the most immediate success? Who's going to win Rookie of the Year?
Yeah,
who could go on to have a Hall of Fame career?
No, I was going to go with immediate candidate, a good candidate for Rookie of the Year. You know, maybe if you want to go both sides of the ball, you can. Just offensive side of the ball. I've already chimed in. I like Jahmyr Gibbs a lot going to Detroit.
Oh yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs at Detroit. That's a great selection. I think I might have to go with that one as well, just because Detroit is very offensively heavy team. I'm kind of surprised they didn't go defense, getting a Jalen. I really thought they should have picked Jalen Carter, Hutchinson, and Carter as a front two. That would have been something for them. But I mean, going with Jahmyr Gibbs, that was a great pick for them. I like for the Texans getting Will Anderson. I think that was a great pickup for the Texans. I think he'll be the rookie defensive player of the year.
Yeah, I think they built their future there. They're saying that we got our quarterback, and now we're going to get our defensive pass rusher. Mark, did Anderson's stats slip this year from 2021? I mean, wasn't there a little bit of a pretty sharp? I'm not saying that he's still not a great player. I don't want to take it away, but it did seem like there was a fairly sharp decline.
Well, if you look at Joey Bosa's stats his final season, and I thought that he played really well. There was just so much attention on him. But if you look at Joey Bosa's numbers second to last season versus his final season at Ohio State, there's a sharp decline.
That's a good point. I agree with that.
Mark, I've got to ask you, did you see there was a tweet I saw today that said the college football playoff schedule, if they were to have it when they have it in 2024, did you see that?
No.
Well, of course, like most things in college football, I think they screwed it up completely. There's no rhyme or reason to it. The first round starts December 20th, and then they'll have like 10 days. Yeah. And then it'll be like 10 days, and then they'll have 9 days, and then the championship game will be January 20th.
Wow.
Was this just somebody making this up?
No,
No, this was official.
I saw it. 365 Sports cover it, so
okay,
it's got some notoriety.
I did not see that.
Yeah, because I thought one of the things with the playoffs was they're going to start it like at the very first week of the bowl game, right after conference championship week.
Mm-hmm.
But with the way this tweet had it set up, Connor Johnson saying it's official. So maybe he's talking to somebody in the chat, but he's saying, no, it's official. But the way it's set up is that the teams with the buys aren't going to play for a full month.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, why is this any different than what we expected it to be? So the conference championships, I would have to look at a calendar for that particular year, but the first bowl games are typically played on a Friday and a Saturday, right around the 17th to the 20th, something in that range. So your conference championships, if they're played around the 5th, they're going to give them 1 weekend off, and then they're going to play the next week, correct?
Yeah, that sounds right. I mean, so they're going to drag out the season to the 20th. And wouldn't that be championship weekend then for the I think for the AFC and the NFC, because the Super Bowl's played the first week in February?
I thought it was second, but it could be.
Real. I'm looking at this right now. December of 2024. Saturday is the 7th. So the conference championship games will be on the 7th. And then if they're playing the playoff games on the 21st, they've given those teams a week off, which they should. And then they're starting the playoffs on the 21st.
Well, maybe it's just me, but I thought they would have went back a week and just immediately go from conference championship week to the next week, because I thought they would have given the teams with the bye the extra week off.
They are getting an extra week off.
No, you go from the 7th, and then the 14th would be the first round of games, is what I'm saying.
Sure. No, I don't know. I knew that they weren't going to do that, and I wouldn't want them to do that. I don't want those teams playing that many games and then they got to go right into the playoffs the first week, right after a conference championship game.
Well, why not?
Yeah.
Would there be any?
I have no issue with this.
Well, Darrell, I know you're not a big fan of the 12-team playoff. You still stand by that?
Oh, absolutely. There,
Okay.
I mean, I'm hopeful I'm wrong about it, David. I'm not sure where you stand on it, but I think this will basically ruin the sport.
Yeah.
So
I've always been an 8 guy, like Mark has been. I've been for 8. I think that always would have, with 5. Well, we don't have 5 major conferences anymore, but when we had 5 major conferences, you could address the 5 major conference winners, and then you could get, a couple of good at-large teams, and maybe if you found a non-Power 5 that had a Cincinnati like dream season, you could maybe get them in. That's why I thought 8 always was the right number. I think 12 is a little too much, though. But college football is trying to get more interest in the sport. I mean, now whether it works. And, I do tend to agree with you. I think that we're still going to end up getting the same results in the end. But long term, it will be interesting to see how it works.
yeah, but I just don't see any evidence how this 4-team playoff expansion has allowed any of the little, quote unquote, little guys to succeed more than they have in the 2-team playoff. And I mean, sure, TCU won a playoff game.
Mm-hmm.
And by that, I mean, Michigan really, let's be honest, Michigan lost that game more than TCU won it. And then they got handed a 58-point beatdown for winning that playoff game. In Cincinnati, I mean, Cincinnati was there, but Alabama could do whatever they wanted. I don't think they were even at 50, but they were probably 50, 60% gas the entire game.
Well, the point that you've made in the past, Ariel, which I agree with, is like David just said, our conclusion might be the same, but the games leading into the championship game may be a bad look, meaning that we may have a championship game on a regular basis that's dominated by the schools that we anticipate, but that the way the playoff system works right now, it's allowing for a lot of lesser conference teams, Cincinnati, TCU, et cetera. We could go on to get into the Final Four, whereas because they have to play into the Final Four, I would expect that the more dominant powerhouse big brands are going to flood that Final Four and shut out the TCUs and the Cincinnatis of the world.
Yeah, I think that's going to happen as well.
Because as it currently stands, they got selected into the Final Four as opposed to having to play into the Final Four.
Right. My issue with the way its format is the bottom left quadrant, which is the 5-12-4 quadrant, is going to be, in my opinion, that's just a joke quadrant.
Mark,
so I think you're going to have one team in the Final Four that's going to normally be ranked like 8th, 9th, 10th overall, make it to the Final Four.
Mark,
right.
the point I wanted to
make, folks line up here. Do you guys have a final thought?
I do. I was just going to make a quick point on that, Mark. Just kind of follow up just to what I originally said. I mean, do you think long term though it helps the, with I think the goal is to get more interest in the sport, particularly throughout other regions of the country. I don't know just what your general feelings are on that.
I think it could increase interest in the sport because there is more opportunity, and therefore we're going to have 5 conferences that are going to have multiple teams in each conference that are vying for playoff games, and playoff spots. So those Oregon Washington games with 2 7-1 or 8-2 teams playing will be extremely important games, instead of just being a nice little top 15 matchup now. Mm-hmm. However, I don't think it's going to provide more opportunity for those teams to win national championships. It's going to provide opportunity for them to get to the playoff, but until proven otherwise, I don't see the Big 12, for example, winning a national championship. And a lot of people jumped on me for making that statement, but I said I will guarantee, I will bet a pretty heavy sum of money that the Big 12 will not win a national championship in the next 10 years. I just don't see it.
I would tend to agree with you. I just think the sport is desperate to get more viewers out there, and desperate to be, get into more regions of the country. And I mean, obviously, Darrell and me know what parts of the country where college football really is viewed, but and the realignment's going to be also an interesting factor on top of this, because we're the whole conferences and regions of the country are going to look totally different come 2024 and beyond. So,
good stuff, guys. Appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Good to talk to you, Darrell.
Yeah, good talking to you, David. Good talking to you, Mark. Come on, Will Levis, get drafted tomorrow.
Let's bring on 2 at a time if you guys are okay with that. We'll start with Jackson, and we'll bring Jackson on here. We'll see what he has to say before we bring anybody else on. Jackson, what's going on tonight?
Oh, it's going very well. How's it going with you tonight, Mark?
I am doing just fine. Joey's not liking me tonight because I just said that the Big 12's not going to win a national championship in the next 10 years.
I'm sorry to hear that, Mark.
Sorry, Joey. You're one of my favorite people. You know that, but I just have to say it the way I see it.
Well, this was something I saw on Twitter about the 5th pick of the 2023 NFL draft from Illinois, Devon Witherspoon.
Yep.
Now, Illinois was the only Power 5 school to offer him a scholarship. The other schools were non-Power 5s, group of 5s, as a matter of fact. Massachusetts, Appalachian State, Temple, and South Alabama.
Nice.
That is a pretty big win. That's a pretty big win for Witherspoon right there. I mean, it just goes to show you that you don't necessarily need to be a 5-star recruit to be a top-notch draft pick. I mean,
well, you don't have to be, but the likelihood is far less.
True. But all you got to do is work hard, play hard.
Well, you got to be, there's a lot that has to happen. Let's put it that way. A lot has to happen so these are the numbers, the last numbers that I saw, that if you're a 5-star, you have a over 40% chance of earning a paycheck in the NFL. Right. If you're a 4-star, that percentage drops to about 12 or 13%. If you're a 3-star, it's about 3%. But 3% of the NFL players are 3-stars. So whatever that is, there's about, 53 on a roster. There's about 1,600 players. So there's about 50 or 60 NFL players that are 3-stars.
For sure. Well, I mean, Dak Prescott's one of them. So that worked out for him. But yeah, what's your take on Will Levis not being taken tonight?
Well, this is my take on Will Levis, is that Will Levis had some wide receiver talent to work with 2 years ago. Wan'Dale Robinson in particular didn't have great receivers to work with this past year, had a bad offensive line. I think that the people that like Will Levis are looking at his size, his athleticism, and his arm strength. I think those are the 3 things he's got going for him. He's played a lot of football, and he's shown toughness, and he's got I don't want to call it a rocket arm. It's not like a generational arm, but it's on the high end. However, he's inconsistent, he's turnover prone, and he's gotten injured a lot. Right. And those are the downsides. And he's a good athlete. He's not Anthony Richardson athlete level. So I'm not surprised. Like I said to David, our first caller, who said, Will Levis did not get drafted. Are you surprised? And I said, well, think about it this way. If none of us paid any attention to mock drafts or listened to any of that, and we just watched Kentucky play football and watch Will Levis, and then went straight from his last game to the NFL draft, and we were sitting here and we said, Will Levis didn't get drafted in the first round, all of us would be like, of course he didn't. It's no big surprise.
Yeah, I mean, like a few days ago, they were saying he's going to be a top 5 pick. but now he's just sitting there waiting to be drafted in second round. Nothing against Will Levis,
No.
but it was just some of the guys at ESPN were like, "Oh, he's gonna be a top 5," and it's you may want to watch some of the games he played again. Because I mean, obviously, I think they need to also watch Hendon Hooker as well. Because I mean, and I think some of the draft scouts need to. I mean, you cannot be using age against somebody, and you cannot be using ACL injury against someone. Because I mean, the 2022 stats that Hendon Hooker had for the full season in touchdown passes, interceptions, 27 touchdowns and 2 interceptions.
Yeah. I believe he went 38-3 the year before.
Yep. Well, 31-3.
31-3. Okay.
Yeah. But that's still pretty awesome right there.
Sure is.
I mean, you cannot just overlook a guy like that. But on the bright side of being dropped down, he's going to be in a good situation. I wonder if the Minnesota Vikings would get him in the second round. That would be cool. But unfortunately, history wasn't made for Bama. I wish it was the top 2 picks, but it's not. It's number 1 and number 3 for Bama.
Yeah, when is the last time that a particular school, I know that Penn State had the top 2 picks in 99. I don't know that it's happened since then.
Prior to that, it happened in 1984 for Nebraska, and that was when the Patriots got Irving Fryer, and it was Dean
Steinkuhler
for the Houston Oilers.
Yes.
And prior to that, and this was the first time prior to 1984, 1967, Michigan State, when Bubba Smith got drafted by the Colts and Clint Jones got drafted by the Purple People-Eating Vikings.
In 99, Courtney Brown and LeVar Arrington went 1 and 2, correct? Or did they go 1 and 3?
They were 1 and 2.
Okay.
Courtney Brown was drafted by the Browns.
Yep.
And LeVar Arrington was drafted by the Redskins, who are now the Commanders.
Yes. Yep. I remember it well.
Yep. We didn't even have YouTube. That was the dark ages.
Yes. Way back in the dark ages without YouTube. Yes.
Yep.
Sure.
For sure.
We all made it through. Those of us that were around at that time.
Yeah, that is for sure. But hey, maybe next year history gets made for number 1 and 2. Who knows?
Who knows? Jackson, we appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me on, Mark.
You have a good night. Good to see you.
Sleep well and stay warm.
All right. Yes, the last 2 players from one school were Penn State's LeVar Arrington, who was really the star of that team, but Courtney Brown went first in the draft and Arrington second. And it has not happened since, although we had Will Anderson, of course, at 3 and Bryce Young at 1 tonight. Georgia Reload, thank you so much for the contribution. Very nice of you. Thank you. I just moved from Georgia to Iowa. Be cool to see the Hawkeyes win the national championship in Houston 2024. Just kidding. But I would love to visit an Iowa game. Well, now that you live in the great state of Iowa, looks like you'll have that opportunity. Shoelace Sooner showing up. Appreciate you being here. Got an early morning. Appreciate you, Mark. Have a good evening, football family. Shoelace Sooner, thank you so much for the contribution. Appreciate you being here. And we take our next call. We got Larry joining the Voice of College Football. Larry, what's going on tonight?
Hey, Mark. Oh, I feel bad for Darrell. You're sitting there because I was sitting there tonight going, okay, I hope Kincaid, you get a little bit nervous, you're rooting for your guy.
Yeah.
And so, he got in there. Buffalo moved up to get him. So I was pretty happy about that. And so that's 2 first-round picks Utah's had. And Devin Lloyd, I think Utah was his only Power 5 offer, and he went first round last year. And Dalton Kincaid was FCS before he came to Utah in 2020, which was the COVID year, so we don't count that one in the Pac-12. So Utah's got a pretty good record of first-round draft picks that didn't do good. In fact, Utah was Alex Smith's only Power 5 offer, and he was the first-round draft pick. And I don't even know if they had ratings in 05, didn't they?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, I don't even know.
Right about the time it started.
Yeah, so he couldn't. I mean, if he had one Power 5, he was probably a low 3-star.
And Utah was not a Power 5 at the time.
No, but I'll tell you what, the Mountain West back in the early 2000s with TCU, Boise, Utah, and BYU, it was a pretty good conference back then.
Oh, absolutely, it was. Yep.
Utah was the original BCS buster against Pitt, and then the next year Boise State, and then I think TCU did it again the next year, and then Utah did it again against Alabama. So
yeah, and they exactly. They not only got into those BCS games, but you had the Utah win against Alabama. You had TCU beat Wisconsin
Oklahoma.
in the Rose Bowl. They beat Boise State beat Oklahoma in the Fiesta, and then of course, as you mentioned, the Utah. And if you really sized up the Mountain West against the Big East, which was the worst of the Power 5 or whatever we called them at the time, we called them BCS conferences. That would be a close call, because the Big East, I never thought belonged in having an automatic BCS bid.
Right, an autonomous 5
yes.
spot. Yeah, because I remember Utah killed them in the Fiesta Bowl. What was it, like
35,
38, 35-7? Yeah, it was just a complete drubbing. And so, so David Greenshield, there's only 4 conferences. Come on, bud. Just because USC's going to the Big Ten, now all of a sudden the Pac-12 doesn't exist. As far as I can remember, USC hasn't been running that conference for a while. So
no, it's been a while. It's been a Pete Carroll while since he's been in Seattle.
Yeah, it was Washington with Chris Peterson, Chip Kelly. Stanford was doing pretty good there for a while, and then Utah as of late. And so, anyway, I also wanted. What's that?
USC's won the conference once since Pete Carroll left.
Since the inception of the Pac-12.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So I think Oregon's won it 2 or 3 times. Stanford's won it a couple times. Utah's won it a couple. I think Washington's won it. I'm not sure how many times Washington's won it, but.
Well, yeah. So we're talking 2012. Yeah. Well, it was an Oregon-Washington or an Oregon-Stanford conference there for about 5 years. So between the two of them, they won it in 2011, 12, 13, 14.
Yeah, they
15,
ran the league.
16. That was all Stanford and Oregon. And then Washington in 16, USC, that was their year in 2017. And then Washington again in 18, and then more Oregon in 19 and 20. And then it's been, of course, the Utes.
Yep. And also, I don't know if anybody else is noticing that the landscape is going to completely change in college football as far as the haves and the have-beens with NIL and the transfer portal. It's been changing, and it's going to continue to change. Look at Alabama struggling now. They used to go into California and just pluck a quarterback, and it's not that simple anymore. Now these kids can get paid. The Georgias and the Floridas and some of these top programs. Ohio State still gets, some creme de la creme guys, but you're getting these really good quarterbacks. They're following the money. They're not following who's going to be a national championship caliber team. And then your depth, what was it? The guy that just transferred begins with a P. He transferred from Georgia to USC. So I think you're going to start seeing too deep issues. I think these guys that can start at really good programs are going to leave the Alabamas, the Georgias, the Ohio States, Michigans. I think these guys are going to continue to leave and, flock to Colorado or FSU, LSU. So I think the talent's going to get divvied up a lot more than it's been. I don't think it's going to be as top heavy, which is going to create more opportunity for teams like an Oregon, a TCU, if that makes sense. Some of these teams that have kind of been climbing, I think the future of college football is not going to be as top heavy in 5 to 10 years from now, in my opinion. I still think like Ohio State and, some of your better programs that have been on top are still going to kind of be up there, but they're going to be challenged a lot more than they have been. What's your view 5 years down the road?
Well, I think that your theory is sound. I'm not quite so sure. This was my initial theory about NIL because I admitted to say, I don't know what's going to happen and how this is going to change the power structure, but we can all throw out our theories. My first theory was, well, if the boosters, the donors, the big money people in each program are the ones that give the donations, that build the amazing locker rooms and practice facilities and give all that money, and then anything that's under the table to the players. Now, pre-NIL, wouldn't those be the same schools that can finance the player collectives, the NIL collectives? That was my first thought.
Right. Which, yeah, under board versus, legit, it made it simpler for those teams to come out and do it. But I think there are programs that had the money. Okay, take USC. I mean, they got slapped upside the head for the Reggie Bush situation.
Yeah.
And as soon as NIL became available, Dr. Dre gave Caleb Williams like $2.5-3 million.
Yeah.
To come over. It's above board. He's using, he did a commercial for Beats and everything. So I think some of the programs that haven't been able to use that money due to restrictions haven't. Now that they're able to do it and not get, smacked around for it, are gonna come around. TCU is, if I'm not mistaken, they've got a lot of wealthy donors. Texas Tech. There's just a lot of programs out there who have some deep pocket boosters, but they've never come into play, and now they are. And so, like Arizona State was able to outbid Florida for, was that Moore? Is it Dante? No, Dante Moore went to UCLA. Rashada.
Jaden Rashada. Yeah.
Yeah. How did ASU get this kid over Florida? Because I'm sure Florida had the money with their boosters to get some kind of a deal worked out with that kid, and he ended up at ASU. So that's one of the things that I'm talking about is, guys like Jaden Rashada would be over at Florida. And I just think that these kids now, these top recruits, and let's be honest, it's the quarterbacks, the CJ Strouds, the Bryce Youngs, those are the reasons that Ohio State and Alabama were really good last year, was a lot due to those guys. They were just amazing quarterbacks. So that's just my point for David and Darrell. I think it's going to become a lot more competitive 5 to 10 years down the road.
I get your point, and I think it makes sense. And I'm not saying it's not going to happen because, like I say, I think you've thrown a lot of logic into that. I just don't think overall that we're seeing it play out that way yet. I still see the same recruiting rankings. I still see the transfer portal, aside from Colorado, and that's a complete aberration and upheaval there. I'm looking at the top quarterbacks in 2024, and I see Georgia, Michigan, Alabama, Notre Dame, Florida, Ohio State, Florida State, Auburn, Tennessee are the top 10
The top 10 in.
quarterbacks in 2024.
Okay, I thought, yeah, USC, I think, got Malachi Nelson last year. I'm not sure who they get next year.
Yeah, let's see. 23.
Malachi Nelson was one of the top 5 quarterbacks, I think.
In 23, it goes Texas, Tennessee, UCLA, Oklahoma, USC, Arizona State with Rashada, Oregon State, Washington, Kansas State, Clemson.
Right. And yeah. So Arizona State and Kansas
State and Oregon State.
Yeah. When do those guys ever get a top 10 quarterback? They don't. So that's just my thoughts. And then tonight I was just shocked on the draft, how offensive weapons were just not, I mean, outside of what, Bijan and obviously Bryce Young and
Smith and Jigba.
Yeah, but how far he was in, what, 20?
Yeah, he was at 20.
I mean, other than the couple running backs and the couple quarterbacks, it was offensive linemen and defense.
Mm-hmm.
There was just, I wasn't seeing receivers taken until later. It was just kind of an odd.
Yeah, it is odd from that standpoint because wide receivers have been at a premium in the NFL draft the last 5 to 10 years.
Right. And you got to give Joey, I did not know that the Big 12 had 7 first-round draft picks. That's impressive for a league with only 10 teams, and Texas only had, what, 1?
So let's see. We had Texas Tech with Tyree Wilson showing up at 7, Bijan Robinson, Texas at 8. We had Will McDonald of Iowa State at 15. Quentin Johnston of TCU at 21. That's 4. Anton Harrison, the offensive tackle, Oklahoma at 5. And then Kansas State with Felix Enedike Uzoma, the edge rusher at 31. So I'm counting 6, unless I missed somebody in there. Maybe I missed somebody. I don't see who I missed, but I'm getting 6. And Texas and Oklahoma, those 2 guys are going to play in the SEC, of course.
Right. But that's what I'm saying. That's pretty impressive that of those picks, they weren't all loaded with the 4 and 5 stars, that those 2.
I'm actually thinking that was a faulty statement I just made. I'll catch myself. I was thinking recruiting, like any player taken by Texas and Oklahoma obviously are going to be playing in the SEC. Those players are Big 12 players that are now in the NFL and should be counted as Big 12 players.
Big
so,
12. Right. Got you. All right. Well, I just wanted to touch base. I don't know if you got other callers waiting to jump in.
No, you're good, Larry. Anything else?
Okay. Nope, that was it. Good. It was a good draft tonight. So
yeah, interesting draft and 6 more rounds. Thanks, Larry. Appreciate you calling.
You bet, Mark.
Voice of College Football, NFL Draft, and we will talk about anything concerning college football. You guys know that. It does not have to be the topic of the night. And man, are we going to have some amazing topics coming up in the next month. So May is great debate month at the Voice of College Football. I'm in the process of lining up 3 big debates. One in which we are looking at the period of time, courtesy Rick and Aya. We're looking at the period of time from 1960 through 79, the 60s and the 70s, and looking at the top 10 college football programs and measuring them in a number of ways to determine who dominated the 60s and 70s, who was the number 1 program in that era. We are also looking at a Clemson-Ohio State debate of the 2019 college football playoff game that was mighty controversial. And then also we have the Big 12 and the Pac-12. And of course, we know what's going on there. A lot of Big 12 supporters believe that the Pac-12 is going to implode and that they are going to pick off the four corners and maybe more from the Pac-12. Pac-12 supporters think not. So we are going to have a debate coming up next week of the Pac-12 and the Big 12. So realignment debates. And I've got a slew of other ones. Florida State, Notre Dame, the national championship debate of 1993, Michigan, Nebraska, 97, and on and on and on. If you've got an idea, please let me know. We can discuss and debate just about anything. Think Ohio State, Miami controversial call at the end of the national championship game in 03. Think tight end U, think QBU. Anything is on the table for a great debate here at the Voice of College Football. And yes, I know I've been saying it for 2 weeks, but my program rankings for 2023 will be released soon. If you've noticed, I've been working on a series matching up schools against their would-be conference affiliation if much of this realignment talk and rumors come into play. Meaning we've matched up Arizona, Arizona State, Washington, Oregon against the Big 12. We've looked at recent history and then projected forward how those schools would compete in their new conference. Oregon, Washington have applied for membership to the Big 10. If the Big 10 accepts, which I do not believe it will, I am not proposing that these are going to take place, just having fun with the matchups of the proposed teams and their new conferences. Washington, Oregon, we've matched up against the Big 10. I'll be doing the same with some of the ACC schools that are up for grabs, potentially against the Big 10 and the SEC. Okay. And once we get through spring practice, which is going to be just about a week away because we've got Maryland and Rutgers in particular and Oregon on the field this Saturday, we're going to start to break down the teams and give out power rankings in each conference and also break down the top 10 players in college football at every position. So a lot of post-spring practice analysis season here at the Voice of College Football. Erica, thank you so much for the contribution. That is mighty kind of you. Go Hawks. It's too late for me to say much else because it's past my bedtime. But 2 first-round picks for us tonight. Baby. Hashtag Hawks by a million. If they fix the offense, maybe the Hawks by a million. But good stuff right there from Erica. And yes, Jack Campbell and Nick Van Ness. I don't remember their particular teams that selected them. Since I've been focusing solely on college football for the last 10 years of my life, I used to watch the NFL draft with both the colleges in mind and the NFL teams in mind. And even more so the NFL teams, because obviously it's more important at that point. The focus should be on the NFL teams and how these players project for them moving forward and how they will play for their new team. That's the focus. That's what's important, not what's happened in the past. But now that I only focus on college football, my thought is doing things like adding up, okay, what conferences are doing the best, what schools are doing the best, and how it matches up and how it slots historically. Let's put it that way. All right. Look at this guy showing up. Good to hear from BGPO Football Funk, our buddy DeAndre. What is good, Mark? What is good with you, sir? Always good to hear from you. Always look forward to your phone calls. Have not heard from DeAndre in quite some time. He'll enjoy the Clemson-Ohio State debate, I'm sure. We've lined up a couple Clemson folks. I may have to take them on all by myself. Ryan is in the house. Ryan, appreciate you being here. NIL Collective's contributions from the everyman will surely shrink if and when the U.S. economy goes into recession, likely this summer. So, to that point, I'm only spitballing. I'm only guessing because I don't know what that ratio is. It's almost like who controls the stock market because you've got little old me throwing my pennies here and there at the stock market. And then you've got the Warren Buffetts of the world, and you've got a tiny, tiny percentage of those people, and you've got a zillion of me, but we're obviously throwing in drops in the ocean compared to what they are doing. So they tend to still control the stock market. And this is much smaller than the stock market. So I don't know what that ratio looks like, Ryan, between the big time donors and the little guy, the guy that's throwing in $50 or $100 or $200 toward his favorite NIL collective versus the big money people throwing millions in. But of course, we know that a recession, and this is a misnomer from time to time, and I'm not an economist, nor am I a speaker of national issues, but it's often funny because, like, for example, when the stock market goes down, and there are certain people and certain politicians that take note of that, and then other politicians will say, well, the everyday American doesn't care about the stock market because they don't have enough money to put in the stock market. You're speaking to the heavy hitters, the billionaires, the multimillionaires out there, that those people are in the stock market. People have retirement funds, 401ks, and the success and or failure, the health of these companies trickles down to those people. They're going to pass on their economic issues, their budgetary issues to their consumers and their employees. Their employees will not get raises. They will not have as good of benefits. They will have to lay people off. That's like when I hear high taxes don't affect middle America because we're taxing the rich. Well, they pass it down to middle America, and if their companies aren't doing well, then it gets passed on to the rest of us. All right, I'll get off that topic. Next up, we've got Nick. All right, Nick, this is an interesting comment. I appreciate the super chat. Thank you so much for that. That's very nice. Mark, how furious are you? Do I appear to be furious, first of all? Is that showing? Because I'm just madder than hell. Mark, how furious are you that the University of Michigan is dominating Ohio State in recruiting? Dominating. Now, not just here, but I find this all over the place, that the term dominant or dominate is far too overused. Far overused. Do we really understand what the word dominate means? Like, I've seen 24-20 football games and had people come on here and talk about how they dominated them. You understand what the term means? Clearly, our buddy Nick does not. But anyway, that's fine. I don't see how Ohio State can't start panicking because they're coached by professionals and they will continue to work hard. Why would they panic? Panic is your worst choice in life. Don't want to panic. So don't buy into panic. Michigan has a 5-star quarterback and Ohio State does not. That's very concerning. Okay. Well, first of all, Nick, you're a Michigan fan, so you shouldn't care. So I don't know why you care. Secondly, again, the term dominating is completely misused here. Right now, Michigan is out recruiting Ohio State. Maybe, depending on your perspective. Do you realize, Nick, that while Michigan has a higher ranked class, so get this, Nick, one of them has the number 1 class in the country. The other one has the number 3 class in the country. and go through year to year to year and size up the teams that finish number 1 in recruiting and the teams that finish number 3 in the country. Look at the lineup of players and you tell me if you can see a difference. So that's first and foremost. Secondly, understand that at last count, I believe this is accurate, Michigan has 14 commits and Ohio State has 11 commits. If you look at the average player rating, guess who has a higher recruiting ranking? Would it be Michigan or would it be Ohio State? Who is brought in based on the ratings? This is all we're talking about, our recruiting rankings and ratings. Ohio State has brought in higher talent than Michigan has with its 11 commits. And don't be surprised, Nick, don't be surprised if Ohio State has a higher ranked class than Michigan when it's all said and done. Don't be shocked. I want you to prepare yourself. Just prepare yourself because I don't want you to panic. And that doesn't mean it's going to be the end of the world for Michigan. If Ohio State finishes, I'm going to predict that neither one of them is going to finish as high as they currently are ranked. That's going to be one prediction I'll make. That Michigan will not have the number 1 ranked class. And I don't believe Ohio State's going to be as high as 3. I don't know that for sure. But there are some teams in the South in a particular conference that usually rally and do strong down the finish because most of those players hail from those states. But again, Nick, why don't you just celebrate? If you find joy in this and you think this is extremely important, then you should just be throwing a party. Don't be concerned with Ohio State fans. But please, I enjoy the super chat contribution. Thank you so much for that. It's been a long time since we've seen Firmus Paradox. Maybe a lot of people are warming up to college football around the NFL draft time that we haven't seen for quite some time. Erica is pointing out that, yes, I said Nick Van Ness. Nick Van Ness, did I not? Yeah, Lucas Van Ness. I got way too many names in my brain. Yes. So Firmus, thank you so much for the contribution. We appreciate you. Nick is coming back with this. Maybe if Ryan Day spent less time dyeing his beard at halftime and more time making adjustments, Ohio State would be more competitive against Michigan in the second half of games. FYI, I kid and I love the show. Well, we enjoy your kidding. We might as well kid because this is where we can have fun, right? There's way too much real life out there that we like to have fun here. So, Nick, thanks for letting us know that you're just kidding. Yeah, a lot of people think I dye my hair. Maybe not a lot of people. I know that it's been brought up here on the channel from time to time. No, I could never keep up with that. And I would do a horrible job at that. I just can see it now. It's going to look like auburn red, and it's going to be a mess if that ever happens. If I ever try that. Well, it looks like we've come to the end of the line in regards to the comments here at the Voice of College Football. We appreciate everybody being here. Tim is pointing out that there are, of course, overall rankings. And that's how the rankings will be done going forward. And they're already done that way now. Is there is a combination of the overall rankings, meaning high school and portal. And that's what makes sense. That's what means something. And for Ohio State, they really lost no one of significance. Yeah, nobody of significance in the transfer portal. And they picked up a good corner and a good safety. That's what they've got so far. And they should be looking to pick up offensive linemen, and they've got one from San Diego State, Josh Simmons, who's a really good player on campus. Now, this is what we want to dominate right now, is according to Big Bumbo 22. Absolutely. That's what we want to dominate right there. Let's dominate the like button. We are going to be back tomorrow during the NFL draft again. At the conclusion of the NFL draft, we will be live here at the Voice of College Football. In addition to that, I am going to go to work on a number of video ideas. Again, that's going to be program rankings for 2023. I was asked today when the all-time rankings are coming out. I want to separate those from the release of the 2023 rankings to not confuse anyone. So we'll do the all-time rankings, let's say in 4 to 6 weeks, but we're going to release the program rankings very soon. We're going to continue our series looking at teams and their matchups against their would-be conferences after realignment. And again, all sorts of other good stuff that we've got planned here at the Voice of College Football. Check out our merch. It's at thevoiceofcollegefootball.com. And I proudly am adorning one of them right now. Here we go. Here we go. Yeah, check us out at thevoiceofcollegefootball.com. And I will leave this link in the chat. It is a phenomenal line of merch. As I've mentioned in the past, we did our best to merge quality and affordable prices. Did our very best to make that work for you. Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it. Everybody check it out. Just if you like something, pick something up. If not, then just be back here and we'll talk college football. All right. We have come to the end of the line. I've got nothing else to say. I appreciate all of you. And again, we are going to cover college football to the best of my ability. I'm going to put my nose to the grindstone to crank out a ton of content coming up. And I understand that sometimes I post some videos and people don't really pay much attention to them. So I'm trying to find the kind of content that you guys, let me put it this way. I'm trying to come up with the kind of content that you guys want to dive into that's not talking about realignment all the time. Because I just can't do that. And maybe my channel is suffering for it, but I just can't talk about realignment all the time. All right. Bilal has shot a fire across the bow toward the Michigan faithful. All right, folks, appreciate you being here. NFL draft coverage back here with you after the second and third rounds coming up on Friday night. Meanwhile, I'm going to go to work on some videos right here at the Voice of College Football.